Welcome back to This Week on Capitol Hill. As we talked about earlier, we're not on Capitol Hill. We're near another hill. We're in Jerusalem. In fact, right now at the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. And I'm with the ambassador to Israel from the United States, my good friend Mike Huckabee. He, long list of accomplishments, ambassador, Baptist minister, lieutenant governor, presidential candidate, TV host, musician, but I think the one you would claim most is grandpa.
That's the best of all. 7 grandchildren ranging from 4 to 13, and of all the jobs I've had, it's the most pleasurable, fulfilling, and sometimes harrowing.
Well, thanks for joining us and inviting us to come into the embassy and sit down to have a conversation.
Great to have you here. It is your embassy, and it belongs to the people of America. It's just an incredible privilege that the president has given me to be here and to serve in this capacity.
Well, I can't think of anyone better suited at this time to fill this role, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But I want to talk about this week. This is a big week in Israel. Yeah. We met earlier in the week. We had a group of pastors and conservative leaders here, but this is the day of remembrance here in Israel, followed by the 77th anniversary of Israel's founding. Big week.
It's a really big week, and the people of Israel have kind of a unique history and a unique perspective about their history. The Day of Remembrance is a very solemn, sobering reminder of what they have been through to even exist. And so there's some very special moments, not the least of which is that on the evening of the remembrance and then the following day, there are 2 periods of the sirens going on all over the country. And everyone stops. If they're in traffic, they get out of their car and stand. We were on our way back from Tel Aviv when this happened on the evening. So we pulled over, got out of the car, and it was just a real reminder that this is what Israel has to live with all the time. Then the following morning at 11 o'clock, the same thing. It was really, I felt connected to that whole process of recognizing that most people in the world don't get up every day and think, any given moment, somebody's going to attack us. In Israel, every day they wake up, they're mindful not only of somebody could attack us, but where's the nearest shelter?
Right.
Where can I go in 13 seconds and get out of harm's way? Then that's followed by the Day of Independence. And this time, 77 years since David Ben-Gurion declared Israel to be an independent state, fulfilling years of promise, years of hope, and finally it happening in 1948. The big thing for those of us in America is that one of the successes of Israel's reconstitution, if you will, because it's been around for 3,500 years, as we know, but Harry Truman, 11 minutes after Israel declared its independence, declared that the United States would recognize Israel. It may have been a saving moment for this struggling, tiny, fledgling nation that just declared itself to be independent.
Amazing story, and amazing what has happened in 77 years. You gave one of your, I think maybe your first speech to a public setting as ambassador this week. You spoke at JNS News, their gathering here in Jerusalem. And you made a couple of comments, and one is that as you began, you said, this is the most contested real estate on God's entire planet.
It is.
And we see that unfolding almost every day. This is a hostile neighborhood.
There's nothing like it anywhere on the planet. I mean, there's places where there's conflict and places where there's civil war, there's all sorts of things. But there's never been one little sliver of land that's really not that big. Everyone says, the size of New Jersey. New Jersey is not that big in terms of geographical footprint. This little sliver of land is the most contested piece of real estate on the planet. And because of that, it makes it a place where there's always tension. There's always a sense of what will happen next. But it's also a place where the Israeli people show an incredible resilience. They know they have nowhere else to go. Golda Meir said that back in the early 70s when someone asked her what is the secret weapon of Israel to win the wars that they've won, because they shouldn't have won any of them. They should have been defeated by all of them. Mm-hmm. And she said, our secret is simple. We have nowhere else to go.
Right.
And that sums it up about as powerfully as anyone could.
Well, actually, you mentioned that. I was down in one of the kibbutz after October the 7th and met with one of the residents, and they asked that question, where do we go?
Yeah.
You made, again, in your speech this week, you said, this is not a geopolitical struggle. This is not the left versus right, liberal versus conservative. This is a vertical battle between heaven and earth, between heaven and hell, between good and evil, between light and darkness. What do you mean by that?
There's no way to understand the battles of Israel, the success of Israel, and somehow ignore the spiritual. The spiritual is the foundation, and it was the foundation 3,500 years ago when God said to Abraham, this is a land that I give to you, and those who bless Israel will be blessed, those who curse Israel will be cursed. The history here is not just a human history, it is a divine history. God's revelation throughout history has always been that he shows himself, and he chose the Jewish people through whom would the message be given. The law came to Moses on Mount Sinai. If you look at the whole history of the conquest of the land, Joshua bringing in the armies as they fought the Battle of Jericho and throughout the conquest, this is a unique part of the world where you cannot describe it, you cannot understand it without invoking the spiritual. Now, Tony, that makes some people very uncomfortable. It makes some Jewish people uncomfortable, might even make some Christian people uncomfortable. But there's no other way to talk about this part of the world, and particularly the long history, without invoking the fact that this is the land of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
So, Ambassador, let me ask you, is that what helps prepare you for this role at this time, that understanding?
Well, I think it does. I'd like to believe that it's important to recognize that there's more than just a geopolitical issue that governs what's at stake here. I'm not a Jewish person. I'm a Christian believer. But my faith as a Christian is predicated, built upon, and it is indispensable to having the connection to the Old Testament, to the Jewish faith, to God's revelation that comes out through history. So I don't know of any other way that I could approach this, except I would use the term, it's a holistic approach.
I want to get into some of the issues because I think this is one of the most strategic positions for someone in the administration, right outside the president's, cabinet. I mean, I think, in fact, probably more important than some cabinet position, not to take away from anybody else, but this, the Middle East is on fire.
Yeah.
Now, a lot has happened in a year since Israel has really turned things around, but we have Iran, we have Syria, we have Turkey moving into this region. Talk about some of your concerns.
Well, it's always a place where there is tension. The word that is operative all the time is it's complicated. It really is. There is the potential, however, Tony, for something that people can't even get their arms around, and that is a total realignment, not just Israel and its immediate neighbors, but the entire Middle East. Syria has had a fall of its leader. Assad is gone. Lebanon is now in a very different place because Hezbollah has pretty much been not completely neutralized, but downgraded. Iran is still a threat, but you have other Gulf states who are now partnering with Israel and working in cooperation, the capacity to expand the Abraham Accords. Everything is in play.
Let's talk Iran. The president, his administration involved in negotiations there. Is there going to be an agreement that we reach with Iran? I mean, are they reasonable people?
No, they're not. To be blunt, they never have been. 46 years they've been under the rule of the Ayatollahs, and they've been very adamant that their goal is to destroy Israel and then destroy the United States. When they've said something like that for 46 years, they put two different plots trying to assassinate President Trump. We're looking at a nation that has a long history of doing everything that it says it's going to do. Now, are they at a point where they've been downgraded in their military capacity because of the Israeli strikes that happened last year? We don't know. So the honest answer when people say, do you have any hope that this will result in some type of negotiated peace settlement with the Iranian government. All I can do is say I hope so, because I'd rather see that than war. But if I'm looking at 46 years of their rule, I'm not overly optimistic that they're just eager to sit down and that they would make a deal, and if they made it, would they keep it? But let's hope and pray that they do. There is a lot at stake if something doesn't happen. The president has been adamant that they're not going to get nuclear weapons. They're adamant they are. That's a stalemate. Mm-hmm. At some point, and I think I know President Trump wanted them to know, he's not kidding. They're not going to get nuclear weapons. So the question is, do they realize that? Do they risk the control of their regime just for the pride of saying they're going to push forward with something that they've been told by everyone in the region they're never going to have? And quite frankly, even their Muslim neighbors don't want them to have a nuclear weapon, any more than you would want a 16-year-old boy to have keys to a Lamborghini and a bottle of whiskey. You just don't give irresponsible people things that they can't be responsible with.
In part, that was some of the genesis for the Abraham Accords, a unified front against the threat to Iran. And there's one thing that's a little different about Iran than other Islamic countries or organizations that we're dealing with, like Hamas, is that the regime does not fully represent the people.
No, they don't. In 2009, there was almost a change of government. People were rising up. It was the Green Movement. President Obama, in his memoir, admitted that one of the biggest mistakes of his presidency was not providing at least, not military support. Nobody suggested that that was appropriate. But if he could have just said, we support the people who are seeking to be free and to unshackle themselves from this totalitarian government, it might have been a tipping point. Instead, he was totally silent, even as the young lady was murdered in the street and the blood running out of her head. That picture kind of showed the end of the Green Movement.
Is that the best way forward for Iran?
To be
free of a regime like that?
Well, it's a decision their people have to make. But if you look back, the Persian culture is a magnificent one. The Iran before the Ayatollahs was one of the most educated places on earth. Some of the
aligned with the United States.
Incredibly aligned with the United States. But even if we weren't, what they represented was a very modern, delightful culture. They were focused on education and advancement and science and innovation. It was one of the really centerpieces of the earth, and certainly in the Middle East. To see it tragically taken by the Ayatollahs and virtually destroyed, the antiquities, the culture, it's one of the great tragedies of the last 200 years.
Ambassador, we're just about out of time. We're up against a break. I want to circle back to our earlier conversation in the last segment about the spiritual understanding of Israel and what is happening in this region of the world. Speaking to evangelicals who are the primary audience of this program back in the United States, how should they be praying right now?
Well, the Bible says pray for the peace of Jerusalem. So it
even more so
right.
that you're here in Jerusalem.
Especially now. But I think what they need to do is become informed. I'm really concerned, Tony, that we're seeing a lot of evangelicals in the States who sort of act like, well, Israel doesn't even matter. It's not even important to us. And I want them to better understand that not only does it matter, but why does it matter? And if evangelicals educate themselves first in the Scripture, that's key, and then in understanding this land, its people, and what they're up against, I think we will see a resurgence of evangelical support for the state of Israel.
Well, I pray that you are right, and that's why we're here this week. Ambassador Mike Huckabee, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tony. Always great to see you, my friend.